The Greek underworld, gates and thresholds. Where shadow meets soul and oath, the world narrows to a single shore, and the business of dying becomes, quite literally, practical. You see, the Greek margin is not an abstract abyss, but a mapped limit, a place where small domestic acts make passage possible. A name is spoken aloud, a coin is slipped beneath a jar, and the last crust of bread is laid upon the grave. And these gestures are not quaint superstitions, but social technologies. Ways for family, city, and cult to mark duty, memory, and obligation. Homer's Nekyia in the Odyssey and later catalogues in Hesiod and Apollodorus give us the poetic picture. Archaeology supplies the material counterparts. Graves with coin deposits, votive offerings, and tomb markers that echo the poem's compact images. Now, the rivers are the margins organizing shorthand, not merely waters, but stations of meaning. So, Styx is the binding stream of oath and divine sanction. To swear by Styx is to invoke a force that even the wonderful deities respect. Later is the river of forgetfulness, where memory loosens and the soul's personal history may be flooded away. Acheron often functions as the practical passage river, the channel where most first arrive. Cocytus carries lamentation in its very name, a river whose sound gathers long communal cries. Phlegeton runs like a stream of flame through the underworld's imagined interior, sometimes punitive, sometimes purgative in its heat. Taken together, the five waters become a schematic for how Greeks think about juridical limits, recollection, lament, transit, and chthonic intensity. At the shore, the rites are brief, exact, and communal. The oboe beneath the tongue, or placed in the hands, is the household's certificate that the last duty has been discharged. It functions as fair, symbol, and public statement. Funerary depositions, libations, and lamentations are the living community's way of saying, "We remember, we have performed our office, we still haunt you in the city's books." Poetry compresses a complex set of obligations into arresting images. A single ferryman, a single shore, a single night. Archaeology, in turn, disperses that image across many households and practices. Multiple graves with small coin hoards, offerings laid in tombs, votive stelae that inscribe names and duties. Both registers converge on the same point. Passage is managed, accountable, and socially meaningful. Entry is also an act of address. The spoken name matters, invocation, formulaic speech, and the performance of ritual words are the way a family secures recognition for the departed. Where the Egyptian world relies on technical passwords, the Greek margin relies on public acknowledgement, names called aloud, ritual speeches made at the tomb, and community memory enacted through commemoration. The difference is subtle but important. Greek practice emphasizes the social record. A remembered name is a kind of survival, and families guard that memory as jealously as any legal title. The human beat is small but searing. Picture a mourner at dusk, the sea, a black plain, the air, a crit with smoke, the stone of the grave still warm with recent touch. She lifts the child's jaw, closes the lips over a small coin, and lays the body where the household will keep it. Far out on the water, a single oar makes a long, measured sound. Charon stroke. In that instant, the whole system is visible, the tenderness of family, the juridical reality of obligation and the ritual machinery that binds city to death. It is practical technology in miniature. So, think of Charon as the ancient world's least hospitable cab driver. No small talk, no refunds, and tips required only as ritual currency. He is an office, not an archetypal demon. His function is to move shades where they need to go, provided the household has done its part, of course. Transit and Psychopomps, coins, oars, and those who guide the shades. Now, transit is where the Greek underworld gets properly managerial, a little bureaucracy with oars. The passage is staged. A staged procedure. A household performs, last offices, a coin is placed, a name spoken, and the shade meets those whose job it is to move it on. Simple enough. In myth, this work is personified in two overlapping offices. On the practical side stands Charon, the ferryman whose boat cuts the black water. On the liminal side stands Hermes, the psychopomp who shepherds the newly dead to the margin and delivers them into the nether court. Neither is a caricature of evil. Both are civil servants of the cosmos doing an admittedly rather unpleasant but necessary shift work, so the living and the dead may keep their accounts in order. Now, Charon's image is compact and memorable because it compresses many rites into one single figure. In epic and on vase painting, he is the one who will not row without a coin, hence the obol beneath the tongue or in the hands. And his role is primarily functional, convey the soul from shore to shore. The archaeological record gives way to the picture by showing coin deposits and small votives in many burials across the Greek world, material echo of the poetic motive. The obol is therefore simultaneously fair and legal token as well as family testimony, a small object that certifies the household has done its duty. The poetry enjoys our single iconic ferryman. Archaeology shows the repeated performance of that duty across many homes and centuries. So, Hermes, by contrast, is the courteous usher. In Homer and elsewhere, the messenger god leads souls to the boundary and gives them over to the agents of the nether courts. His psychopomp function is theologically significant because he connects polis and nether and put them in order, making passage a public ritualized act rather than a private vanishing. Other psychopompic figures appear in regional cults and later mythic elaborations. Sometimes local deities, sometimes river demons, sometimes ritual specialists in burial cults take up the task. The diversity of agents matters because it shows that the single ferryman image is a poetic shorthand for a much more complex ritual economy. You see, myth loves to name exceptions as a way of teaching the rule. Heroes, initiates, and those specially favored by the wonderful deities often bypass ordinary procedure, and these exceptions tell you how seriously the rule is taken. For example, Orpheus charms the netherfolk with song and secures a temporary return. Admittedly, a very short return. Heracles tracks Cerberus up into daylight and must return him. Admittedly, Heracles is a demigod. A heroic foray that proves the boundaries of reality by violating it and then restoring it, of course. Such tales underline the system's texture. Most go by the prescribed route and ritual. A few exceptional figures take other paths, and the poetry uses their exceptionality to dramatize, but most people cannot even hope for. Now, there are also local and chronological variants worth noting. In some traditions, the role of ferryman is pluralized or even shared. In others, the psychopomp is more visibly a priestly function, performed by living ritual specialists who guide the corpse in procession and pronounce the necessary formulas. Vase paintings, inscriptions, and tomb scenes preserve a variety of images. Single oarsmen, groups of attendants, processional lines, which together suggest that practice accommodated local custom, class differences, and changing funerary economies. Functionally, transit is a social transaction. It ties together family obligations, civic expectation, and religious technique. So, the family must provide a token and perform lament. The community recognizes the proper rites, and the priest and ritual specialist supply the words and order. The small human detail often makes the mythology plain. A mother pressing a coin beneath a child's tongue, a neighbor singing a burial lament, a procession moving to a cliff or cave where the dead will be interred. In that moment, the living demonstrate that the social ledger is balanced, that debts have been discharged, names spoken, and memory ensured. Aaron, for all his grim dignity, is also a model of ancient customer service. Kinda unhelpful, curt, and very literal about his payment policy. No refunds, no credit, and certainly no complaints have to be lodged at the Palace of Hades, next to the queue for Persephone's audience. God shades and monsters, the king, his queen, and those who gnash. The underworld, at its heart, looks a lot like a palace. If your idea of a palace includes more shadows, fewer chandeliers, and a very strict doorman, well, doorhound. Hades rules with a sovereign calm, not wrathful or capricious in the later devilish sense, but implacable and juridical. He is proprietor of a realm that demands order. His sovereignty secures boundaries rather than delights in torment. Beside him sits the wonderful Persephone, queen, seasonal divinity, and the chthonic principle of return. She is both the royal consort and the living metaphor for soil and seeds. And in her double office, she gives the court its humane, regenerative dimension. The household is not an afterthought of myth, but the model for how communities imagine posthumous order. A god that commands respect and rituals that reproduce legitimacy. So, shades are the court's citizens, but they are not full persons in the way the living are. The psyche remembers names and grievances, recalls honors and slights, and carries the social residue of a life. Yet, it kinda lacks appetites for heat and their capacities for sovereign action. Poets use that attenuation as a rhetorical tool. A shade can bewail its fate, repeat its grudges, or teach by contrast. For instance, Achilles in the Nekyia complains to Odysseus that the best thing is life itself, not immortal renown. A striking moral moment, because the hero shade, once great in action, becomes eloquent in absence. That exchange is a small drama of values. Memory preserved, desire frustrated, and the living led to reflect. Heroes such as Achilles or Agamemnon retain an distinctive cast in the underworlds. Their presence keeps heroic prestige alive in cult and memory, while also revealing the limits of glory. And then, there are the monsters. Otherwise it would be boring, wouldn't it? Threshold figures who perform boundary work rather than quadratus millis. Abaros, for all his snarling reputation, functions as a guardian of the gate. His role is to prevent return, to mark the line of the house. Hesiod and the archaic poets place chthonic monsters in a genealogy that ties them to earthborn progeny like Typhon and Echidna, thereby locating monstrousness within an ordered family of cosmic antagonists. The heroes demonstrate exception, monsters demonstrate prohibition, and they are the mythic signpost of what the court forbids. Their presence on vase paintings and in epic verifies the cultural need for bodies that dramatize the boundary between order and chaos. You see, the court is also a social theater. Clerks and attendants are present in accounts and in poetry. Psychopomps such as Hermes shepherding the newly dead to the threshold. Judges and adjudicators, later traditions make Radamantos, Minos, and Aekos into formal magistrates. And minor chthonic divinities who administer local cults and household rites. Offerings and libations are not merely pious gestures. They are the currency by which shades remain visible to the living and effective among the dead. A funerary cult thus replicates the royal economy in miniature. Names inscribed, voices invoked, gifts presented. Domestic bureaucracy, so to speak, that sustains communal memory. Dramatically, the Odyssean encounter with Achilles remains one of the clearest ways to teach the underworld's moral texture. So, place the scene. Odysseus kneels, the shades gather, and Achilles great among men. Voices are longing for the simplest goods of life. The conversation pulls the audience between admiration for heroic splendor and sober recognition of mortality's finality. It is precisely through such encounters that the underworld becomes a stage for ethical reflection rather than mere horror. Hades is not monstrous. He is not a monster boogeyman of later moral fable. He is the custodian of limits. Persephone is not a passive prize, but a sovereign partner who mediates growth and return. Kerberos is not gratuitous cruelty. He is the estate's lock. Seeing the court this way helps keep the myths honest. They are civic instruments, dressed in striking images. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, where accounts are tallied under blessed rest. Where the door closes with a ledger and the book of the dead weighing, the Greek shore closes with stories that do a pretty similar job, auditing lives, naming exemplars, and teaching a city what it must not forget. You see, the Greek netherworld thus balances two economies, reward for the few who are honored, and punished exemplars whose fail instructs the many. It is less a single doctrine than a repertory of images that together perform civic memory. The judges first appear as honored exemplars turned magistrates. Radamantos, Minos, and Aekos, originally kings and men of proven justice who, in later telling, become the triad that sorts the dead. In some strains, Minos has the casting vote. In others, regional duties are apportioned by lot. The point is functional rather than metaphysical. The dead are assigned to places appropriate to their lives. Plato and later literary tradition literalized the tribunal into a courtroom scene. A pretty useful philosophical device. But the root idea is older and civic. Men renowned for fair rule become the names by which posthumous order is spoken. Tartarus supplies the graphic negative, a cosmic pit for the utterly recalcitrant. Hesiod places Tartarus as prime death and the prison of the Titans. Poets populated with exemplary sinners. Sisyphus eternally rolling a stone, Tantalus standing hungry beneath unreachable fruit, Teutos devoured by birds. And these stories are not sadism in miniature, they are pedagogic tableaux. Each punishment matches a transgression, cunning, that abuses the deities, a portrayal of Xenia, violent assault on sacred kin, and the punitive imagery encodes communal taboos. The point to the listener is blunt and social. Outrage the deities or violate the polis norms, and you become the story that wants children by night. Across from Tartarus sits the green margin of reward, Elysium, the height of the blessed, or the Elysian fields, and the mythic golden age are not a single systematic heaven, but related imagings of blessed continuity. Hesiod sketches an earlier golden age, Homer drops hints of favored shores, Pindar celebrates victory and immortal honor by imagining restful islands for the splendids. The criteria for admission are various: divine favor, heroic birth or deeds, or peculiar honors of local cult and heroic cult at tombs. In practice, civic cult and commemoration play a decisive role. To be remembered in song and cult is to be inscribed among the city's honored dead, and that inscription is the closest thing the Greeks offer to lasting felicity. The moral work of these images is double. They console and they instruct. Achilles' lament in Inequia that he would give all his fame for a single living hour invites pity and reflection about the limits of chaos. The fate of Sisyphus or Tantalus instructs about the folly of hubris and the inviolability of sacred order. The poets, therefore, set hero shades and punish sinners in contrast, so that listeners may see what the city esteems and what it abhors. The underworld is, in short, a rehearsal space for civic ethics. This architecture is institutionally embedded. Funerary honors, tomb rituals, and public cults determine much of a deceased person's posthumous reputation. And those goods are social achievements, not private metaphysics. A heroic cult at a tomb, a poet's song, or a citizen's liturgy can elevate a name toward the aisles of the blessed, whereas public disgrace and forgotten tombs consign a name to oblivion or to the scaffolding of moral exemplar. The judges, the pit, and the blessed shore are therefore parts of a cultural pedagogy, stories and rites that teach people how to live so their names remain useful to the polis. So, imagine the underworld as a municipal records office with metaphysical flair. The judges are the clerks, Tartarus is the binding file of exemplary cases, and Elysium is the entry in the honor roll. Get your paperwork and your poets in order, and your name will not be lost in the stacks.